Before we get to the show, I want to let you know about the Deer IQ Advanced Whitetail Workshop, now taking registrations. This 2-day experience gives any hunter the exact tools and mindsets needed to take the top deer where they hunt consistently. If you struggle to get on good deer, sometimes struggle to seal the deal, or already are a good hunter but want those last few pieces of the puzzle needed, this workshop is for you. Sign up below while we still have room in this hands-on, minds-on educational experience you won't forget. And now let's get to the show. Hi, and welcome to the Deer IQ podcast where smart hunting begins. I'm Adam Lewis, and we're in our series on land and food strategies, how to best set up your land for whitetail success. In this episode, I'm with Kevin Vistisen of the Deer Hunter podcast for part 2 of our talk. Part 1 is on his podcast, and we're going to look at the macro view of land, potential solutions to deer management issues affecting many states, specifically using the example of Michigan. This is an important talk about land and our use of it that applies to virtually any state on the management level. And there's a glitchy part of Kevin's audio because he lives in the boonies, so beware of that about 12 minutes in. I think you'll figure it out. You guys are a smart audience. Okay, so here are the top things to look for during this episode. What does Kevin say the general fix is for hunters taking back control of our natural resources, which have been overtaken by bureaucracy and anti-hunters? What does Kevin say about the nature of social media in the hunting space and what we need to be very careful about when using it? What is Kevin's experience on APRs and what are his thoughts on their ability to change a deer herd? What do I think is the true root issue in states like Michigan and the true fix that we need to make deer hunting great again? What are some potential private access solutions for areas that are off limits for most hunters due to leases and lack of hunting permission? And there's a lot more important stuff in there that we talk about, so let's get to the podcast and up your Deer IQ. All right, welcome to the Deer IQ podcast. I'm here with Kevin Vistisen of the Deer Hunter podcast. Kevin, thanks for joining us. Welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be on Deer IQ, Adam. How are you this evening?
I'm doing good, man. It's good to have you on here. If people didn't listen to, we kind of did a co-podcast, and if they didn't listen to the first half, I invite you to go do that. That's going to be over on the Deer Hunter podcast. That's Kevin's podcast over there, and it's number 359. It's called The Next Generation of Whitetail Management. And we're kind of doing a series here where we're talking about land and food strategies, but I think this applies talking about our use of the land quite a bit. And, you know, the first part, if you want to go listen to that, we talk about some challenges here in Michigan. And we're both from Michigan, and I'll let Kevin tell you his background in a second. But if you've never been here, if you're coming from there, welcome to our podcast. And check it out. We got some different things going on. One of those is what we call the Deer IQ test, which is a fun 10-question quiz. And we'll try to get Kevin to take it, and you can compare your score to his, but we'll link that below. But we look at different tactics and how to be smarter, better deer hunters. And Kevin and I thought this was a good conversation to have, just an honest conversation about where we are and how we can really do our part to make things better. I think that's really what this conversation's about. And part 1 was highlighting some of the issues, not to complain, but to have an honest conversation. And tonight we're going to try to highlight some possible solutions. Not that we will have them all for sure, but we're going to just discuss some of these things here. So before we do that, Kevin, tell us, if people don't know you, tell us a little bit about you. We're both here in Michigan. And like I said, this can apply to, I think, anybody in any state where you want things to be better. You realize things could be better. And, that's what we're talking about here. But Kevin, give us a little background about you, if people don't know you?
Sure, yeah. I'm going to be 42 this summer. Been deer hunting for about 3 decades. Love bow hunting, love gun hunting, just love deer hunting, period. I got a wife and a couple young kids, and I'm living the American dream. I live up here in northern Michigan, own and operate my own business, and then also work for a company as a licensed plumber. So I kind of work two pretty full time jobs, I guess, and do the dad and the husband thing, and have a serious drive and passion to deer hunt. So spend an insane amount of time in the woods, and it's usually my default thing that I do if I don't have a responsibility at hand, or I carve out time for it. Obviously, when necessary, is all things deer hunting. Done a podcast now and kind of worked in the space for going on a decade, and relocated myself to northern Michigan here just a few years back. For a variety of reasons, but one of which is because of deer hunting. I love big tracts of land. I love semi like wilderness, remote whitetail hunts. I like still hunting and tracking, so I kind of is works out good for me to have access to a lot of acreage. So where I'm located, I have access to seemingly right now infinite acreage, but some of the stuff that I am seeing that some pressure being put on that for a variety of reasons, and I've been paying close attention socially, politically here the past couple months, and definitely have some concerns around not just deer but wildlife management. How it's been handled, where we're at with it, and how it goes forward. And like I said, I'm 42 years old, so I feel like guys like yourself, me, and our direct social circle are kind of middle-aged men right now that are primarily responsible for protecting this resource, and we got to get dialed in and get moving, because right now a lot of things seem like they're heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, and I'll just you know reemphasize that if you're around our age, it's easy to sit on the sidelines. It's easy to get on social media and make comments. But really, it's kind of, I would encourage people and say it's our time to do something, to make a difference in the ways that we can, right? And so that's something that needs to be talked about, and hopefully this discussion will get you at least thinking about taking some action of some sort, right? So I think that's real important. And let's just dive in here to Michigan in particular. We raised some of the issues, and I will say some of the issues I think are on the hunter level that we can hopefully find some solutions for, and some are on the political level. And a lot of people don't like to get political, but the reality, I think, is, and tell me what you think, that a lot of these problems come about because of political reasons. And that means the fix potentially is political, in a sense. So, what are your thoughts about that? As far as, I haven't really said any details here, but people in general, maybe not happy with the direction of deer herd management in Michigan. What would you say is, I guess, some solution to how we approach that, just from a broad perspective?
I think the days of being able to say I don't pay attention politically because it's frustrating, or it sounds like a luxury to not have. Things are so good that you don't even have to pay attention to the, like, it's like saying this giant ship is on course, we don't ever even need to check the wheel. I feel like it's a responsibility as a grown adult to be tied in and at least have an overview and understand of what all political parties, how they represent you, how governing bodies work, just having like a broad overview of like what could directly impact my life here. And I feel like that attitude of it's convenient for me to just not pay attention and not be involved with it. Gets us to where we are right here in the state of Michigan, where you now have non-hunters driving portions of rules and regulations that are happening based off just emotional rhetoric that circumvents our North American model of wildlife management that is supposed to be factually based in science. And when you tie emotion into that, you circumvent it's convenient to just put the science second, I guess, or just discount it fully. I don't really understand that metric, but how we got to a position like this, I think, is a lot of people, probably myself included, not paying enough attention to what's going on. So being tied in somewhere, some way, somehow, maybe it's just even like a buddy that is like way smarter than you, and you just kind of lean on him and like, hey man, what are you seeing here? Like give me the Cliff Notes version. What's going on? But get that from a handful of people, and that's kind of how I base my things, is just keep talking to people that know more about it than me. Like keep looking for somebody that has a little bit more information than I have on it. And that's how I continue to have be set rigid idea. You get a new set of facts brought to you. You got to be willing to mend your pathway there a little bit. So anyways, there's a big shift going on now, and I think there's never been a better for guys like yourself and me that are really making sure that children, grandchildren, and their have wildlife areas, clean air, water, the whole deal, right? So they can have to live and have a good life. And I feel like nobody's better than deer hunters or hunters in general. Hunters and anglers are on the land all the time are the ones that are in, and the ones that live in the big cities are the ones that are the furthest connected. And when you have a system that the people that are furthest disconnected drive policy affects the people that are the most connected, you're off course. And that's currently where we're at.
Yeah. What do you think is the fix for that disconnect? Because I think when we talked about this last one is that, the DNR and NRC have signaled that, hey, we want to help make the deer herd better. We realize it's not where it should be. And so they had the DMI teams and all that. And then the NRC took 0 suggestions from them, which was a huge letdown. And do you have any thoughts on, okay, where do we go from here to bridge that gap?
Yeah. You ever see What About Bob?
Oh, yeah.
With Bill Murray, baby steps.
Baby steps.
That's how we're going to do it. We're going to go What About Bob? And we got to go baby steps. And the first baby step that we're taking is talking about these things and saying, hey, yeah, I'm not crazy. I'm seeing the same thing. Who else is seeing this? Do we have a unified message that we can move forward and, just start coordinating efforts out all the time? Just think about making a bunch of power, but not putting it to the ground. You got to have a motor and a transmission and a drivetrain, right? You can't just be sitting there spinning your tire. You can make a ton of power, but if you just spin your tires, you're not going to go anywhere. Talking about it is the foundation of I think the movement. Talking about it, and then the next one is action. And I see guys reaching out saying, hey, I'm going to NRC meetings. You should go. I'm getting those texts from people. I'm hearing, hey, there's a ton of anti-hunters at all the NRC meetings, and it's pretty out of hand. We need a show of force here. This is so. Those are things that people are going to have to act on, right? If we're talking about these things, what's the next step? Take action. It sounds like here in our state, and for anybody that's listening in a different state, get tied in locally and start showing up and being a little bit of a presence, and getting organized.
Yeah, because I think the temptation is, to just vent online, right? I'm going to vent my frustrations on social media, and how much good does that really do, type thing. I think another thing, and we can go here if we want, talk about, okay, if I'm unhappy, let's say with the Michigan deer herd sex ratio, right, or the bucks, the hunting isn't very good. We can get into minutia of that, like, okay, is it APRs? Guys will argue about that. Is it one buck? Is it doing something like earn a buck to help balance the herd, to have a better hunting experience or better herd? But the question with that is that just, do we need to get more at the root of the problem, which is how decisions are made at the state level, right? Because that's just surface stuff that could be done. But when, for example, guys go to NRC meetings, they say things, those DMI teams, the NRC asked for input, right, from these DMI teams, but they didn't listen. Having those discussions, although they might seem like, hey, let's get some APRs in place. I guess my question for you, what do you think about this, is, are those level discussions what we need to be having, or not? Or those like down the road type discussions?
Well, I think first and foremost, you want to make sure you have us hunters need to regain the largest seat at the table. And I actually think we're to the point where we need to kick everybody else off the table because we have to figure out a way to exclude anti-hunters from having any voice or opinion into hunting. Like zero tolerance, right? So the way that we're structured out in our state right now seems like it almost just needs to be dissolved and then completely rethought, because why would you have someone that is anti looking to destroy the thing that you are looking to protect showing up? It's like our house is really flammable and there's really high winds and we haven't had rain in a long time. Let's have a bonfire. It's like, no, maybe we shouldn't have a bonfire, it just, I don't understand the concept of, and I don't see why those people should be involved with how we move forward with wild game management. So that's one thing. And then I think everything else could start to fall in line a lot better, because we are having to use a lot of resources right now to fight fights like that are real. I mean, anti-hunting legislation is putting people out of hunting, and in like the UP not having any control over our wolf population is driving people off the landscape for deer hunting, and then they either don't hunt anymore or they repopulate other areas. That puts additional pressure on. That's just a real good local example of saying this is crazy that the hunters aren't the ones that are, having the largest. And I understand, and it's an extreme concept to say nobody else should have any seat at the table, but you kind of get my point on what I'm saying there. We should certainly have the largest piece of pie moving forward, getting that resolved. And then I'd love to take a minute to touch on social media for a minute.
Yeah, but I'll just say real quick, I guess to follow up what I was saying and piggyback off you is, can we all get on the same page? I think that is important, like for even just the state of Michigan, let alone hunters in general, across the nation. Can we get on the same page and not argue about APRs versus one buck? I have my opinions on that and how that might help the herd, one versus the other, etc. But is that really what we should be arguing about? We need to get on the page in a bigger sense so we can actually make change. I think that is a struggle for hunters, realizing that, hey, we actually are on the same team. And we can debate that stuff, but it's not really helping right this second, type thing. Yeah, go ahead about social media though, because I'm guessing that is along the same lines.
Yeah, it's like, can it happen or will it happen, right? Of course it could happen. We could have way better leadership and get people unified and have a message and move forward. Will it happen? I don't know, to be determined. Social media is predatory on negativity. So just know that going into it, that they're looking, the negativity is the accelerant there. It moves, all those posts move way faster than anything like neutral or positive. So you get on there and real quick you get sucked into this kind of world that's driven by negativity. And I think that there's a way that you can still utilize that and navigate it, but you got to know that right going into it and be conscious and not, let it be predatory to you, because it can be, especially, I mean, something happens that is, near and dear to you. You get emotional. People will go there, and it's like, how many boomers hated the Super Bowl halftime show? Like Facebook just lit up because they didn't like the halftime show. It's just interesting and funny, but people will go there to complain. But if you know that, you can be a step ahead of it. And I always try on my feed, out of 10 posts, 9 of them will be positive and 1 will be like bitching and complaining. And I feel like that rhythm still almost won't keep you from looking like, because if all I do every time I come and or see your if you're just complaining all the time, I think you're a crybaby. If the pattern that I know you by is you just complaining all the time, you just look like a whiny individual. And there's so many middle-aged men in the hunting space that just look like crybabies online because every post is negative, but they're falling into that pattern. Some people are even conscious of it, and they'll, the top, like, obviously you get executives that work at these companies, they understand this stuff, they drive these type of comments and things. It makes the platforms operate better than if there wasn't negativity. So it's real easy to get pulled into and kind of lost in. But being conscious of it and being a step ahead of it, and I think like if 90% of what you do on social media is positive comment, positive reinforcement, and then 1 out of 10 post is, I say bitching and complaining, but anything that you're going to say that could start an argument, essentially, that somebody's might not agree with you. And it's as simple as me and you saying, we really, really, really need to take a long, hard look and figure out what we're going to do in the here and now about the wolves in the UP, because they're decimating the deer herd and it's causing problems for the landscape and for short term, for long term. We don't want to see deteriorating landscape and less areas for people to hunt. Like, we're losing access. There's a whole talk right now about threats of public land. Yeah, if you want to talk about direct threats of public land here in the state of Michigan, how about getting pushed out of the UP for deer hunting because there's no deer left, because we don't have a tool to manage, our wolf population. And so you do need to figure out how to navigate social media and use it and learn it. And I'm not saying that I fully do, but I do understand that it's a negative place. It's much more negative than in the real world. You'd never get a group of guys together that love to deer hunt and have them all just start fighting and arguing over stupid shit like arrows and broadheads and antler point restrictions, right? We'd have respectful conversations with one another. So the internet isn't a real place. It's its own creation, and it feeds off negativity. And if you go in there understanding that, then you'll be better off, and we can figure out how to go forward as hunters. And social media is not going to ever be publicly very friendly space for us, and I don't think that we need to be pissed off or worried about that. Is like, if that's where all the anti-hunters and the people that don't know how good this is, don't understand it, want to hang out, we'll just go do our own thing over here, but we all want to be involved nowadays and have big followings on social media. And so we put all of our stuff there, and a lot of it kind of looks despicable to the general public, and we don't do ourselves any favors. I always was just talking with a friend, and I say, yeah, all we do is fill up the media kits for all these anti-hunting companies. All they have to do is go to our Facebook pages and our, our YouTube thumbnails and all the stuff, and seeing it's just we're filling up the anti-hunters media kits that they're then bringing to the rules and regulations table and getting us kicked out. It's just too much for me to handle.
Yeah, I think there's definitely this thing of, okay, you can use it in a positive way. You just have to be very conscious of it, I guess, because it is easy to get sucked into negativity. And really, here's what big thing I see, and we can get into some specific other stuff here in a second. But a big thing what I see is people tend to focus on things that are out of their control, right? And when you start doing that, all you're doing is it's not helpful at all, right? So focusing on things you actually can change or have influence over is a huge thing. And in this area or whatever it is, right? What can we actually do? Let's focus on that. Otherwise, it's kind of complaining, like you said, right? When it gets to like getting on the same page, I think that's a huge thing. Can we get on the same page? Can we get a vision for the future, and where there's a bunch of different visions about Michigan's deer herd, and if it's good, should it be better? That stuff. One of the things that I see, and I'll just throw this out there, is that currently how it's set up, and this would be a big thing to do. And so this is just a conversation. These are just thoughts, but all states are set up similar, and some states are doing better than others, I'd say, for sure. There's discontent in Michigan with the deer herd, like we talked in the first episode, and wanting it to be better. But when the NRC is the sole decision maker and there's zero accountability for them, that makes change very difficult when they've already signaled that they're not taking much thought or not making big decisions necessary, right? When there's no accountability, people go to these NRC meetings. They'll listen, but they don't have to do anything. And the DNR said that too. Chad Stewart said that when the DMI teams went to them, they said, well, we're going to give them a bunch of suggestions, and these teams spent months and months working on stuff to give suggestions to the NRC, and they didn't take any of them because they don't have to. And so one thing that I want to throw out there to maybe start thinking about is the setup itself of how decisions are made. And you kind of alluded to this, but as a legislative change, the governor appoints the NRC members. There's 7 in Michigan. They make all the decisions. The DNR advises them. They're supposed to listen to them, but they don't have to, type thing. But making a change there to where there's more accountability, I think, would be a good move if we could get there. And that'd be the type of thing where I would say, could we get on the same page with something like that? So for example, could we get a change legislatively where instead of 7 NRC members, there's 3? There's still a governor appointed, but there's 3. And then we give the DNR, who are supposed to be the experts, right? We give them votes now. Let's say give them 3 votes because now they don't have any. And then we have a group of public elected public team members. Let's say there's 3 of them that they run for election just like anybody else that gets elected. And they have to put up a resume and reason like why they should be part of this decision-making team. And they're part of it. And that'd be 9 decision makers that none of them would have total control over decision-making. and be able to run the board, kind of like the Supreme Court, And so something like that is something I think could create change over the long term, right? To where right now it's a stalemate. Like you said, if certain people get in there or they just have a certain agenda, then you aren't going to change that. Or if right now the NRC has shown that they don't want to make big decisions that are necessary, right? So it would kind of balance out that power, more like our government is naturally set up anyways in most cases. So that's a thought that I've had, and that'd be a huge, huge shift. But instead of arguing about $1 or APRs fixing our deer herd, I think that is the focus potentially that if we really want to make a big change, it would be something like that, because then those changes would come out of something like that. What are your thoughts on that and that idea?
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that you put a lot of thought into that, and I think that that's a viable pathway, would be a viable pathway forward. A governing body that better suits or has a better chance to actually suit the resource and the people that use it and want to actively pay. Like, hunters actively will pay to keep the resource going. When people complain about license sales going up, I understand that, because they feel like they're paying more money and they're getting herd less. So that doesn't necessarily work. But if you showed them a better model and then showed some results, I think people are willing to pay. So I think that I think it makes good sense. And then also, you can look in the short term. We'll have when's the next gubernatorial election, and who's going to run,
Yeah.
and how is what's happening at a federal level right now going to affect that next election. I just read. I read everything. I read in CNN yesterday. I read an article that the Democratic Party is at an all-time historic low with public favorability. So I'm just saying that there might be a good opportunity to make a shift and a change coming up in an election here in our state, and then something put forward for a more long-term viable solution would probably be great. But let's, that's something that people are going to be concerned about is there a chance that we could get, see, it always comes back to leadership with everything.
Yeah.
Imagine we elect someone here in the state as governor that is a very passionate, outdoorsman, and values like you and I do, the purity of the landscape and the hunt and the animals and the people that do it all. It would be a total turnaround, right? Like, not a total turnaround, right? It's going to take decades to resolve some things, but it would be the shift that we need in the here and in the now, and then a more long-term solution. So like you said, it can't just swing this way, swing that way, swing this way. It keeps swinging further and further, and everything, it gets more violent as it swings further and further,
Yeah, that is important. Elections matter. Elections have results or consequences.
Consequences to the results of the election, right?
Okay, so here is your high IQ moment. Social media is an interesting phenomenon in our culture that can be both positive and negative. So I'll challenge you with this. Take a look at your posts, your interactions, and count up in 1 week how many are positive and how many are negative. Also, how many are regarding things out of your control versus things within your control. I'm an offender at this as much as anybody, okay? But if we can do this simple thing and start consciously focusing on positive posts regarding things we actually have under our control, I think we'll take a huge step forward as a hunting community. and being a force for the changes we want to see. It requires some humility and honesty, but is a high IQ thing and something to think about. And I have 2 free resources for you to check out. First is the Land Management Starter Kit, which goes through 4 big questions every land manager must ask to set up their property for success. You can download it below. That will really help you get off on the right foot or help you get back on the right track for whitetail success managing your specific property. Second is the Deer IQ test that Kevin took and thousands of others have taken as well. It's a fun, easy quiz you can also take and compare your score to his, which I'll reveal at the end of the episode. Take that and share it with a buddy you think isn't quite as deer smart as you. All right, and now let's get back to the podcast. Let's dig into the minutia here. So let's just say, for example, because as much as we say, hey, let's not dig into the weeds before we maybe get to the root of the problem. But while we're talking, let's just throw out some ideas about this. So, for example, in Lower Michigan, the DNR has said, hey, we've got way too many does. We're way too buck-centric in our culture here. We need to fix this. And all they've done is added a few more doe seasons, and it hasn't changed our harvest levels. We're still harvesting way more bucks than does. What do you think are some fixes to that? We can get into some of these nitty-gritty things here with balancing the herd, being less buck-centric, fixing the doe issue in southern Michigan. What are your thoughts on solutions there?
Couple things. Earn a buck, where you harvest the doe. You turn that in, and then you're able to purchase a second buck tag.
So earn a second buck.
Earn a second buck.
Okay.
Yeah, versus just you getting 2 buck tags, right? We're going to make that second buck a real money grab, okay? So we're either going to have a doe, earn a buck where you turn in a doe and you can then purchase a buck tag, or charge twice as much for the second buck tag. You can have a second buck tag, but it's going to cost you twice as much. If these issues that we have already been discussing are being resolved and I'm seeing positivity, I have no problem paying in. But I want to see return on that investment, right? So that's why we talked about that first. Now we're talking about these things. I don't see how that doesn't solve a couple issues. One, some people are just going to say, I'm not going to do it. 2, the resource makes more revenue. People will be maybe a little more advantageous to, just go spend the money on, I'll just get the combo, It's like, well, it's substantial savings to just get 1 buck tag, and I really only need 1 buck tag, So, okay, that'd work. Or, like I said, the implementation of we need to take more does out, and we want to protect the buck population a little bit. You have to fill a doe tag as a requirement to get a second buck tag, and put a 2-3 year stamp on that, and then let it be revised and see how it's playing out. And I just think those couple things right there would really help address issues. And then I don't think I would be against. I don't think I would be against APRs potentially statewide, not in the UP. Obviously, I don't want to speak for them. They're basically their own state.
Yeah.
But APRs in the Lower Peninsula, I don't think they're perfect. I know they're not perfect, but they help immensely. I mean, that's the fastest way that anybody's going to see real positive results. Okay, I'm just going to give you this scenario because this is real to me, and it just happened here back 2 months ago. I went to a big buck night at a local brewery. It's a big event. A lot of local guys there, a lot of really good deer hunters. They said to me, 10 years ago, you come here, the buck that would win this would be 115, 120 inches, okay? In the surrounding counties, I don't know how many years it's been now, but it's getting closer to a decade. They put APRs in place. The deer that are now winning those contests are in the 160s. So you want to talk about a huge difference? Like,
Yeah.
I'm seeing it in real time. APRs can dramatically change the quality of buck that is on the landscape. If you did the earn a buck with the doe tag and statewide APRs, the state looks totally different in 2 years.
I think a big key there that I'll point out, a big key there is monitoring it, right? Like if the state will set goals, I think before you even start making changes, this is what I think is where people get ahead of themselves. Like you need to set goals you can actually measure that will actually get results, right? So what result do we want? Well, we want a deer herd that looks like this, whatever that is. Okay, what's going to get us there? And this is where people get the cart ahead of the horse is, okay, they just start talking about do this, do that. Well, what's the actual goal? We got to define that first, and then we implement things that scientifically, biologically should get us there that are proven to, right? Because other states have done them and we know this, right? And then you measure it, right? You got to have some sort of measurement data to show you if it's working or not, right? And you kind of gave some, right? That isn't data, but it's observations, right? But the DNR should be able to do that in our day and age. And I think that's where hopefully we're starting to get, but they've really fell short in the past. And I think that is where a lot of distrust is because they come out with these numbers and it's like, well, what do those even mean? Where'd you get those? We've only started actually collecting mandatory reporting the last 2 years. And, data should be driving our decisions and our regulations toward a specific goal. And so that whole thing needs, in my opinion, worked on, right? Getting good state goals to help our herd, then getting good regulations because we have an NRC that will actually work with us to do that, to hit those goals. And then you're measuring them every year. How are we doing? What do we need to change, right? And as you do that, guess what's going to happen? This low approval rating is going to go up when people see results, right? And like you said, people will start buying in a lot better when they see the data and when they see results from these goals, right? If it's working or not, and you'll be able to see it. So I think that's a huge part is figuring that stuff out and being very clear with that. That's part of the DNR and NRC working together to do that.
Yeah, I think I maybe have one other thing that I would add that might be controversial.
Go for it.
But I think it could potentially help reduce the doe herd is the re-implementation of baiting. I hate baiting when it's out of control, when people are just being crazy and dumping, hundreds of pounds of food in a place. It's like sloppy, and it's illegal anyways, right? But people just as soon as baiting's legalized, people just feel like they can take it to the limit, right? I'd actually like to see baiting be made legal again, but something of the sense of like, you can put out a 5-gallon bucket over 10 square feet a day, and if you
wow,
what's that?
They've had those type of things before with baiting.
Yeah, but what good are rules if there's no enforcement? So
right.
My thing is with technology nowadays, I think that they could find somebody that was, dumping hundreds of pounds of food, and I would like to see them heavily fined. You know what I mean? So that it sets a precedent to like don't abuse it, but for doe extraction on state land, gosh, And a lot of times what happens is the people that bait on state land stop baiting. The people that bait on private land, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to listen to that.
Yeah.
So all the deer get pulled into private.
Yeah.
And, then a huge sections of woods just kind of go like ghost of deer. And so this guy, the next thing you know, the guy that's hunting the private, he's got all the deer on there. Well, he's not interested in a doe. He's got, cell cam pics of this big 10 point. He's waiting for that deer. So now you that wanted to go out on public and shoot a couple doe have no doe around, and they're just all safe harbored eating a bunch of bait while this guy's waiting on his. So I think re-looking at baiting here in the state would be I don't see how it doesn't reduce the doe numbers dramatically. And then with having antler point restrictions too, baiting gives you a minute to like take a look at what's going on here. Like you got to count some points. What exactly is get a second look or whatever. A lot of the young bucks are gonna they're going to walk off, and I don't, you could get into a whole thing then about your conditioning them to bait. They're not getting negative interaction at bait until they're a certain size. But I don't know, as deer hunters, I mean, so you're telling me I'm going to have a better chance to get a 3.5-year-old buck? Like it seems, I just seem like a combination of the things that we discussed here, if they were actually implemented, like you said, with the goal of observing 2-3 years from now and saying if we're not seeing course correction, then what's our next move? But I would have to believe that the results would be so positive that everybody'd be like, yeah, what's the next little thing that we can tweak or do? Because it would totally change the state.
Yeah, you touched on something there, and I will say that I personally am a fan of more of one buck than APRs, but I think they both could accomplish it, and it at some point it's like, okay, either way, if it gets us to the same goal, who cares type thing. But here in southern Michigan, one of the big problems is the doe issue now. Like we have less hunters than we used to. And I think I mentioned over on your podcast that in the late 90s, we had 900,000 hunters in Michigan, and now it's just over 500,000. So we have way less hunters. That's less freezer space, right? And we've got this doe problem in southern Michigan, and a lot of them are on private where people can't get permission, and that's been a huge issue for the DNR, and their solution so far has been, okay, we're going to add more doe seasons. They already know that doesn't fix it. And they don't know what to do. They've sent a letter. Okay, we want people to take more does. It's not happening, right? What are your thoughts on that? On, like you mentioned, the guys are hunting public, but a lot of the deer are on private and can't get access. I think that's a huge problem in southern Michigan. Any thoughts on that one? I have a couple, but what are your thoughts?
Well, the bait will help that. But one thing I'm thinking about as you're talking about this is, as you said, you would be a bigger fan of a one buck. What does a deer, what does a buck tag cost here for a resident in the state of Michigan right now?
Gosh, you're quick. Is it $20?
$20. That's it.
Is it? Wait, you said non-resident?
Resident.
I think so, right?
Yeah, which seems crazy cheap, right?
Well, they're gonna up it, right? Aren't they saying they're gonna up it?
So my question to you is, what if instead of being a one buck state, our second buck tag costs like $200?
I don't think many people would buy it.
Okay, there you go. So that's a step in your direction because you already only want one buck tag, right?
Yeah.
So I would up $20 seems crazy. I mean, I can't believe you can get a deer tag for $20. It's insane. Even if it's $30, even if it's $40. I don't know, just for the value of you get of $100 bill nowadays, to go out and shoot a whitetail deer.
Yeah. Well, some people complain about $20, but we won't get into.
I know that, but then they go in the grocery store and they get $22 worth of snacks and soda on their way to deer camp.
Right.
So come on, I'm not buying it.
Well, and one thing I'll say is though that the freezer space thing, like if you are only going to shoot one buck and it takes 3 to fill the freezer, okay, you have to shoot does, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, I like the idea of this is complex. I like the idea of a second buck tag being astronomically priced, but if you shoot a doe, you can then buy a buck tag for like the same price as your first tag or something along those lines.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just like, dude, I don't even want to shoot a doe. I just want to go out and get another nice buck. I got $200. All I do is love deer hunting. I don't care. And so you go do that, or maybe you're like, damn, I for me, it would be like, it'd be a badge of honor to go turn your doe in and get your second buck tag. You know what I mean? It's like, dude, I got another deer for the freezer, which I was gonna do anyway.
Right.
Now I just save money because I got my second buck tag discounted, and I'm feeling good, man. You're making me want to run for governor.
That's it. You should. You should. I'd vote for you.
Only because of my whitetail perspectives.
What about? Let's talk about this, and we'll kind of wrap it up because we could talk forever on these possible solutions. But what about access? I think access is a huge problem, and some of my thoughts of that are, like a lot of the southern Michigan private land is locked up. It's owned or leased, and people won't get permission because, like you're saying, these owners, there might be big time hunters, and they are trophy buck hunters, and they are saving that to shoot this one buck, right? Meanwhile, the doe population goes unchecked. That's part of the issue is hunter access, right? I mean, and I know it all boils down to, and sometimes money issues, but having better programs in the state for people to get access to private, like HAP program. Can we, what can we do to beef that up? What can we do to incentivize private land hunters to allow hunters back on private land? Because, for example, like out west, a lot of states, like I was in Kansas this year, there's so much private land that is accessible to hunt as public land. In some way, I think the state needs to really look into the incentive program to get people to allow hunting versus just lease it or not do anything with it. I think that would be a huge help. The question is, how to do it. But any thoughts on that here? And then we can close on some your thoughts on some positive things we can do that anybody can do, maybe one or two, to just get involved right now to make a positive step forward. But what are your thoughts on that idea?
I think the private land thing that's going to be real regional based on supply and demand. If there's a lot of people around that want to hunt and there's not a lot of land, it's going to put a lot of pressure. If there's more land and less people, it's going to be less pressure, right? So it's going to vary quite a bit. In Michigan, it's tough because I was just driving around our old farm this weekend, and all the places that I used to hunt have housing developments built in them now. The amount of development that's happened over the course of the last couple of decades, and that's going to continue. We got to be real hyper-focused on not losing an inch of ground on public land, really. And that's why we've been talking about it, why we've been talking about the wolf situation. Anything that's driving anybody out of any good hunting opportunity, because you do need development for the economy to run. There's going to be more people. There's going to be more housing. There's going to be more retail. is gonna continue to put pressure on the landscape. So, one, and this is like an extreme ownership principle in regards to private, is if you want to hunt private, buy some. Like, make a plan, figure out a point of entry, buy some land. Maybe it's 2.5 kind of crummy acres, but it's attached to direct access to federal land or state forest or something along those lines. So now you have your little piece and you could start working on it. Maybe you can make a couple bucks off of it, sell it in 7-10 years, buy another piece of property. Like, I think if you really love hunting, and property's like a pretty solid investment, right? So if you're an age guy, like we're talking about getting to be middle-aged guy, well, when you want to invest in some land anyways, you could probably curb. I know people, how do you afford land? You can curb spending habits. You'd be amazed at how much you can, set some money aside and how little you could get into a smaller piece of property. So I think if you want better access to private land, you go buy some. And that may seem like a wild statement, but I never thought I'd own land, and now I own land. If you had told me, 15 years ago that I'd own land and be shooting deer off of it, I'd say, no, I don't see how that's happening. No way. My wife likes having sidewalks around and being able to go run and push little kid strollers and stuff. She's always wanted to be in town or around town or whatever. We were never going to live. We weren't positioned to live on a farm, but I was able to buy some acreage, and I now have I'm putting a blind up and scratching in a food plot, and so that's got my private land. It's scratched, and then you are the steward of that piece of land. No matter what arguments going on Facebook or what the state's saying or doing, you're managing your own little piece. And that's like, get your life in order, get your house in order before you look for other problems to solve. So I think that, and once you own land, there's always something to do. It'll keep you off Facebook more.
True. I think that's a good tip to maybe end on here, Kevin. Just doing your little part before you start trying to do everything else. But any last thoughts here, and we'll wrap it up.
I hope a ton of people listen to this, and I hope they find value in it. And I'm really optimistic. I've been having conversations with you and a lot of other like-minded individuals, and I feel like this message is getting heard and louder. I kind of feel like the last few years, a lot of people have been timid to kind of speak up, and that I feel confident that starting to talk about these things is the foundation of how we get organized and begin to move forward and find a pathway to, execute on a lot of the stuff that we talked about here tonight, because it would be amazing. I want to be you and I recording a podcast in 5 to 7 years going, man, can you believe that the UP, did you see the numbers from the UP? Like, their deer herd's up and things are looking good, and that's great. We got, wolf season, and we can trap wolves, and we have, total control. The people in the UP, the wolf debate should end at the bridge. No one south of the bridge should have anything to say about how the UP is managed. Maybe there could be some input from a board. And obviously they need state dollars. But as far as general population and emotion goes from people that live in cities in southern Michigan, we need to disconnect how that affects the UP politically so that they can get organized and handled and get governance and wildlife management back to a local level, and base it solely off of the scientific system that we said, we agreed generation ago that this is the way that this should be managed moving forward and protected. And it seems like a good time to say, hey, it could be convenient for you to avoid these things because they're frustrating, but you're not positioned to be in that position right now. It's time to get educated, get organized, and make sure we do our part that future generations have the same opportunities or better than we had.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Well, before we go here, Kevin, I'll say a couple things. First, I will reveal if Kevin will take the Deer IQ test. Everybody out there should take that test. If you're new here, I hope you follow this podcast too, because we have a lot of good educational stuff to really up your Deer IQ. But take that quiz. And Kevin, tell our audience if they don't know about you and what you're doing over there. I know you have some products and stuff you've worked on and developed here the last year or two. So give us a little bit about that.
Yeah, everything can be found at deerhunterpodcast.com. Put the show out weekly. And then DH3 is our line of synthetic deer scents and lures. I brought it to market 2023, continuing to add some new products in this year. Real excited about some of the products. I don't know how to talk about it, Adam, without coming off salesy, but I'm so excited about some of the products that we have and are, bringing out this year. It's been really, really fun. It has my full attention. And right now, we've been covered up in snow, just buried for months now, but our snow is finally getting out. I know guys down south are obviously already way ahead of us, but it is such a fantastic time to start getting out in the woods and taking over a scrape, starting your own mock or synthetic scrape, and getting a camera positioned over it to be able to intel deer, hunt off of. But yeah, DH3, it's DHTHREE.com, and that's our line of synthetic scents. That synthetic tarsal gland that's in the branch catalyst, there's just nothing like that exists in the entire scent market, animal-based product or synthetic. And the results are people see it when they purchase the product. So if you go to our website, you can see all the testimonials from customers. I'm not just saying that. And I love historically messing around with any and all scent products. It's been a fun passion of mine for a very long time. I think it's a fun way to hunt. A lot of times we get wrapped up in the seriousness of the pursuit these days, but ultimately, if you're not out there enjoying yourself and having fun, what are you really even doing this for? So food acquisition and to improve the quality of your life, we love using synthetic scents and lures to put a deer at a known yardage and have them kind of distracted there for a minute so that we can capitalize on them. So DHTHREE.com, deerhunterpodcast.com. We've been real active on our YouTube as well. It's Deer Hunter Podcast. But Adam, as always, really appreciate what you're doing in the space. Appreciate the conversation. I had a great time here this evening.
Yeah, me too, man. I appreciate you coming on. We'll put those links in the show notes and everything so people can access and take a look at your stuff. So thanks again, Kevin, for joining us here tonight. All right, let's reveal Kevin's Deer IQ test score out of 10. And he got a 6, which actually is pretty good. It's a tough quiz. What did you score? Take that link below. And here are your high IQ takeaways and challenges. First, what can you do to be a positive factor toward making deer hunting better in your area and state? Start where you hunt, with your neighbors, then look at your social media and your presence there, and your involvement in groups that have influence regionally or at a state level. This is our time to make a difference. We just have to get involved. And next time we continue this series with a land flipper, an interesting view to building better hunting land and wealth at the same time. It's a thought-provoking talk you won't want to miss, and I'll see you then.